Aloha kako. This is Abreen Padeken here, and I'm here with our lovely friends discussing about Ke Awalau o Puʻuloa. This is Kepoʻo, our cousin and our renowned world traveler. Uncle Kyle in the corner, Kajihiro, very, very experienced in all things of culture, and Wayne Tanaka, following is Sandy Ward and Dani Espiritu to follow us up on what we can do for our island. Kepoʻo.
Hey, aloha kako. Mahalo for joining us. And our talk story today is we get to know Puʻuloa better from a whole bunch of different perspectives. As it's fitting for its place, anytime we talk about Puʻuloa, I believe it's fitting, or when we talk about any aina here in Hawaii, I feel it's fitting to start first with mele, Naoli, to acknowledge this place. And so I would like to begin with that, this mele, halau Puʻuloa. Halau Puʻuloa e awalau no e awalau mo anana ke hau. E ki o wailu e muli wai. No e wa no aina kai aha mauli o aha mau anaka leo ke Kānaka. O pānea mai ua ne ihila hila. E oi ala I loko ke kai. O ke kai pua kai. Ulai ke kai o kuiai. Maunui a kako. So let me see. All right, did the slide move? Okay, sweet. Aloha wau Kepoʻo Keliʻipaʻakaua. Currently live in Makiki. I'm a PhD student right now, UH Manoa. My master's program focused primarily on Waiawa, which is an ahupua'a within the area of Puʻuloa, and is where it's through that work out in Waiawa that I became more acquainted with this aina of Puʻuloa. So today I'll be talking to you primarily. We're gonna, it's like a 10-minute talk here too, so it's gonna be kind of a crash course into Puʻuloa through the perspective of Kanaka or Native Hawaiians, as told through maps and as told through mo'olelo or stories, histories, and tellings. And so this presentation is titled He Alahula Ke Awahuna. And so alahula is taken from a saying pertaining to Puʻuloa, say alahula Puʻuloa He alahele no ka'ahupahau, or that Puʻuloa is a frequently traveled area by ka'ahupahau. And so through this talk, we'll get to know who ka'ahupahau is, what an alahula means, and who this place Puʻuloa was before and continues to be now. The term awahuna here refers to the fact that a lot of these stories have been kind of overshadowed by different narratives, different histories, different events that have been kind of imposed over them. So the word ava is another word referring to the many harbors here, huna being hidden. I'm not sure, I think maybe these slides will be available to you afterwards. If not, I'm happy to make them available in PDF format. And the mele that I just chanted earlier within itself contains so much insight, so much stories about these places. And so we will have just a little brief walkthrough through all of that today. So for my talk, we're going to first center ourselves and understand where Puʻuloa is located geographically, and then through these mo'olelo, we will also look at where Puʻuloa is located, even within the hearts and minds and the na'au of our people. So where is this place Puʻuloa? You've probably heard of it referred to more commonly as Pearl Harbor in recent times, especially since 1899 when the name was coined. But Puʻuloa are these many harbors that are located within the moku or district of Ewa on the island of Oahu. You see highlighted there in orange. If we zoom into Ewa a little more, then here you can see in dark blue the region of Puʻuloa, at least the harbor region, and the surrounding areas, all of which is, to my understanding, that aina that is called Puʻuloa, and it contains many ahupua'a, or the subdivisions of the moku, ranging from Honouliuli in the far west to Aiea in the far east as part of the Ewa moku, and then you also see the ahupua'a of Halawa that is part of the adjacent Kona moku to the east. And so now that we kind of know where Puʻuloa is situated geographically, we'll briefly go through some of the mo'olelo here to get to understand and get to know some of the akua, or gods, of this place, and the vai or the abundance of Puʻuloa as it has existed in the past and as it can continue to be today. And so anytime we talk about Puʻuloa, we need to talk about Ka'ahupahau. And so Ka'ahupahau is in a kua mano. She's a god that takes the form of a shark. She can take the form of a human being as well. And she's most well known for her protection of human beings. So her, along with her large retinue of sharks, family, including her brother Kahi'uka, are in charge of their shark army here that is tasked, as I said, specifically in the protection of people. Ka'ahupahau is known as an aumakua to many, or like a guardian of sorts, and therefore humans have that responsibility to take care of her in return, and therefore is a reciprocal relationship of sorts and mutual respect for not only between humans and the environment, but between humans and gods in these different realms too. This is a map made by one of my students. It shows rough depictions of the homes of some of these shark gods, including Ka'ahupahau in the west, Kahi'uka towards the north, and whatnot. Again, this so key points here, you see that Ka'ahupahau is a shark god, guardian of Oahu. They defend this place from outside carnivorous sharks referred to as niuhi. And some of the main lessons we can take away from her mo'olelo is a relationship of reciprocal nature, a mutual respect. And also we can take away lessons here of protection from external forces. Again, my apologies that this is a really quick breakthrough. It's a short amount of time to go through this stuff. Another really important story about Puʻuloa is the arrival of Kane and Kanaloa from the realm of the gods. And so prior to, there are many stories of them walking all along the Pai'aina of Hawaii, the entire archipelago, creating punawai, these springs and sources of water. So a lot of stories about their travels, but the very first stop when they enter the human realm from the realm of the gods is in Puʻuloa itself. They stop in Waimalu. They visit the home of a person named Maihea. And after visiting him, they make their way to Waiawa and they bless that area, naming all of the different places that had already been named by humans, and granting blessings of abundance so that the fish within its waters be as abundant as the stars in the sky, that the kalo be the same, that the waters of Kalahikiola be as sweet as the sweetest sweetness, as I like to call it, that would be really enjoyed with the awa produced in that area as well. And then they returned to the home of Maihea, in which they imparted to him all of the kahuna practices. So this is all of the skill and knowledge of the priestly class, of all of the different types of experts. And this is the first time that that knowledge was given to humans in this realm directly from these two of the major male akua. Previously, people would refer to them as the major male akua. I like to point out that the four major male akua, we have many gods, female gendered and otherwise gendered as well. And so at least these two dudes, major gods, came in to Puʻuloa, and we see the importance of this place to the gods. We see its significance in the development of so many fields of expertise, including very special kahuna practices. And then we see through the blessings of Kane and Kanaloa, Kane in one part embodying fresh water, and Kanaloa that of the salt or ocean water as a metaphor for the convergence of their realms and their bodies to enable abundance, as you see in such an area like Puʻuloa, where the brackish water enables for a multitude of fish ponds and great abundance there, which we will now talk about in our next mo'olelo here, focusing in on Kalani Manuia. Stepping forward a little bit more in time, Oahu is constantly associated with the great chief Kakuhi Hewa, who Oahu is known to be renowned in its abundance, like so much food being produced, so much fish, so much kalo, that it attracted chiefs from other islands to come over here and enjoy that. But that all started with his grandmother and actually her mother before her. And so his grandmother is Kalani Manuia. And who was she? Well, she was the mo'i, or the paramount ruler of the entire island of Oahu, just like her mother, whose name is Kukani Loko, was before her. Under their reign, Oahu lived in a period of great peace. And as such, when a nation is in great peace like that, especially here in Hawaii, that's when you're able to take on very large scale productions like the creation of massive fish ponds, which so many were created during the time of Kalani Manuia. This is a story that has not been told very frequently over many years. A big part of that is probably due to a few factors. One, that she's a female, and history has been primarily been told from a predominantly patriarchal perspective. And when it is told in that way, a lot of times the narratives tend to prioritize those stories that prioritize things like strength and war and violence and all these kind of things. So a time of great peace, which I would say requires a lot more skill, requires a much greater leadership, tends to get overlooked in this way. And so it's important to remember this female leader of Oahu who helped it to thrive so that the abundance of kakuhihawa that is celebrated in songs was made possible. And so here, again, I've kind of recapped these bullet points earlier, and you'll have these slides available for you. And the last mo'olelo we'll talk about too is Kānaka Maoli and the Puʻuloa oewa. And so the people always talk about the famed pearl oysters of Puʻuloa, but they actually were valued more for their meat than the pearls. There's others who valued the pearls, Westerners who came later that found more of that value to them. But these oysters were introduced to Puʻuloa by the Akua Mo'oinanea, who is paramount ruler of the Mo'oakua, or reptilian gods. And Kānaka Maoli is the Mo'oakua's place and protection of a lot of the fish ponds of Puʻuloa and these oysters as well, who are referred to poetically as the I'aha Maoleo, because these oysters, ha'amau meaning to silence, leo meaning voice. So these oysters are referred to as that sea food or that sea creature that silences voices, because when people go out to gather them, you would have to be extremely quiet, otherwise the oysters will close themselves up and disappear. Anyways, so ancestral times, there was a maka'aina who took too much oysters and she was allotted, and so she was punished for this by the chief in charge, the konohiki. The konohiki then went to her home and punished her again wrongfully, seeing this double infraction. Kānaka Maoli saw an abuse of these resources and as such removed all of the oysters as punishment for the abuse of these resources here. So lesson learned from this is, again, over extraction of resources, abuse of these resources, not tolerable, and abuse of power, no matter what your ranking, will not be tolerated here. Again, I'm a little bit over time here. This is a really quick crash course through all of this, but the main points I'd like you to take away from this is that Puʻuloa, prior to being known as Pearl Harbor, prior to the events of World War II and whatnot, though notable and though important, had a very rich history as a place of abundance of many, many fish ponds. Over 37, I argue probably over 100 fish ponds within the entire region. As you see some of them depicted here, which comes from an 1894 map made by Kanaka Nui. Though today, a lot of that has been overshadowed by other narratives and have been impacted by those who have settled in the area too, primarily the US military, which you see here, the presence of the Red Hill Field Line, which will be discussed later in this presentation as well. Though it is our hope that through continuing these mo'olelo and whatnot, and the continued efforts of community, as you'll hear voices from our community here today too, that Puʻuloa will continue to rise and continue to be restored to that abundant place that it once was before. And now that I've gone way over time here, I take the opportunity to pass it over to Kajihiro, who will talk more about Puʻuloa and Pearl Harbor into the Kingdom Times. Mahalo, Kyle.
Hey, aloha. Mahalo, Kepo'o. And aloha kako, and mahalo to Japanese American Memorial Pilgrimages for the opportunity to share with you folks. Let me pull my slides here. All right. So hope y'all can see this all right. So I wanted to talk about the transformation of Puʻuloa into what people now know as Pearl Harbor, and to a place that, if you can see my virtual background, it looks like this today, where you have a homeless Hawaiian man living in the margin between the bike path and the water, but he can't go into the water. And meanwhile, the Navy occupies this place that was once a place of abundance that Kepo'o had described. So start with David Malo, a Hawaiian historian, who said this in 1837. When the high tide rises, large fish will come from the dark ocean. When they see the small fish, they will eat them. This is a poetic way of describing the process of and the threat of imperialism to the Hawaiian kingdom. So what do these large fish look like? Well, here is a really clear example stated by Senator Albert Beveridge. The Pacific is our ocean. The power that rules the Pacific is the power that rules the world. And that power is and will forever be the American Republic. So here I don't think you can find a more clear expression of U.S. imperial desires and ambition. And Hawaii is the target of that. How that process happens, let's jump to 1873, when General John Schofield led a small party to the Hawaiian Islands, masquerading as tourists, but they had secret orders to scout out locations for a military base. And he writes back, "It is the key to the Central Pacific Ocean. It is the gem of these islands, valueless to them," referring to Native Hawaiians, "because they cannot use it, but more valuable to the United States than all else the islands have to give." And so this is, he's describing this gem as Ke Awalau o Puʻuloa. And this map from the same year that he visited, you can see some of the details that went into this. The dark hatched areas show wetlands where there's taro plants and banana trees and other crops. And then you can also see these enclosures of the fish ponds that Kepoʻo was describing. This is one of the most concentrated areas of aquaculture in the Hawaiian Islands with this very sophisticated system that utilized the flow of fresh water to increase abundance. So this was an Aina Momona. This is a fat land that fed the island of Oahu. But you can also see in this map here at the bottom, in the mouth of the channel, you see those little those are numbers crisscrossing the channel. Those are the Navy, the U.S. Navy's depth measurements of the channel as they're making plans of how they're going to build their naval station. And so what Schofield was calling valueless is this incredible abundant landscape that Hawaiians had created, such as this here, where you can see, the village and some of the fish ponds that were there that people were caring for. Places like this that were producing kalo, some of the the fish that and seafood that supplied this place. This was known as a place of abundance of different kinds of shellfish, crabs, oysters, these kinds of fish like the ava and the mullet, but especially the pipi, the ia hamaoleo, the pearl oyster that Kepoʻo was describing. And you can see from this photograph that if it were to close, you could easily lose sight of it. And this is why they say that this was a fish that silenced the voice. Now, and Kepoʻo also mentioned the great shark deity Ka'ahupahau. So this line that comes, it was a poetic expression. It's also a line in a song, popular song, Alahula Puʻuloa, he alahele na Ka'ahupahau. Everywhere Puʻuloa is a trail of Ka'ahupahau, and I'll come back to that later. But Puʻuloa is also the object of desire of the United States for its coaling station, and it became a bargaining chip in the conspiracy between the white settler sugar planters who sought to increase their economic benefits, their interests in selling sugar to the United States. In exchange, they were willing to trade off Puʻuloa for a trade agreement. And when the Queen tried to rescind some of these onerous laws, they conspired with the U.S. minister to overthrow her in January of 1893. And so this is where the broken relationship between the Hawaiian Kingdom and the United States happened through a military intervention. We could see that this event was the first regime change. And if you look at U.S. history, you'll see a long pattern of the United States intervening and overthrowing legitimate governments. So Hawaii would have been the first. Shortly after that overthrow, I came across this newspaper from 1894. And this is from, mind you, this is a paper that was pro-US, pro-annexation. But somehow there at the bottom of this page, someone snuck in this little line. E peku kupaka awa nei paha ka hiu o ka ahupahau. I ka pahu hai o ka aito, ke ho'opunana aku ma kona home ma Puʻuloa. The tail of ka ahupahau will kick down the flagpole of the eagle if it makes a nest in her home in Puʻuloa. So this is almost like a prophecy or a kind of a wish for people that didn't support the U.S. taking over their country. Hawaiians resisted. We now know that there was a massive petition drive to resist annexation. This petition, the Ku'e petition or resistance petition, represent the vast majority of Hawaiian subjects against annexation. And they won their fight. They stopped the Treaty of Annexation from being ratified. And so without a treaty, there was no way for the U.S. to legally annex another sovereign country. So why does the statue of President McKinley at McKinley High School have a Treaty of Annexation in his hand? So this is how deep this lie goes, is that they had to make it look like Hawaii willingly joined the United States. But what really happened is the United States went to war with Spain in 1898. And as a sort of a wartime measure, the military generals and admirals advocated for the United States to take Hawaii by a simple joint resolution of Congress. And so this is where the militarization begins, where military troops are based here at the foot of Leahi, or otherwise known as Diamond Head, on their way to the Philippines to crush the Philippine Revolution. Around 1901, the U.S. starts to construct Pearl Harbor. They dredge the channel, they rip out the coral reef and destroy some of the fish ponds that are in the path. And then around 1909, they start to dredge an area for a dry dock. And so this is how it looks, where they start to dig into the coral, rip it out. Around that time, canoe with 3 Hawaiian fishermen paddled up to this work crew that was dredging the dry dock. And one of the elders said, that this was a sacred place to Ka'ahupahau. There's a cave underneath where they would feed the shark. And he said that, you will be punished severely and eventually you'll have lots of trouble. But they wouldn't listen to him. They said, the foreigners don't believe in this stuff. Day after day, he came back and warned them until about 3 years went by and the construction proceeded. Then the elder fisherman passed away. And about 3 days later, the dry dock blows up. They try to drain the water and the pressure just crushes it into this splintered wood, whirlpool of water and timbers. And so many Hawaiians believe that this was part of the lesson from Ka'ahupahau, that they had violated this sacred place. And some of the newspapers in that time reflected that sentiment. But World War I broke out shortly thereafter, and now the U.S. funded the base to be rebuilt. And so this time they got a Hawaiian kahuna, spiritual leader, to help to kind of make a blessing and clear the path for this construction to proceed. And so in 1919, they inaugurated the new dry dock. And then shortly after that, newspapers read that the kahuna aids the engineers to complete the dry dock, and that a skeleton of a large shark was found at the bottom. And so this is another poetic expression about Puʻuloa became lonely when Ka'ahupahau went away. But I would ask, or did she, right? This is the origin story of the Navy's creation of Pearl Harbor, right? That they had defeated the great shark goddess and then took over this place. But in 1941, when the Japanese attacked, many people saw this as also a continuation of this streak of bad luck, this tragedy of the destruction of Ka'ahupahau's home. And today, sadly, this is the only kind of knowledge that many people have about this place. Is a place of war, a place of tragedy, a tourist attraction. But it's also a place of contamination. And this is what you would see now on the shorelines if you go down there, where there's a toxic cocktail of chemicals, deadly substances in the water, in the soil, where it's no longer safe. And it's also off limits. And as you'll hear later from the other presenters, the Red Hill fuel spill and water crisis, is only the latest incident in this line of tragedies, where we now have kia'i, or protectors, rising up to shut down Red Hill and to clean up this source of water. So I'll end here and pass it on to Wayne Tanaka from the Sierra Club and the Oahu Water Protectors, who'll be sharing about the Red Hill situation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kyle. Good afternoon, everyone. Wayne Tanaka with the Sierra Club of Hawaii. So today I'll just talk a little bit more about the crisis at Kapukaki, or in Red Hill, associated with the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility that the U.S. Navy maintains to presumably conduct its operations in Puʻuloa and across the Pacific. And really I want to take a step back and look at the public trust doctrine, which is a Native Hawaiian concept that looks at things like water at Aina and recognizes its inherent value. And really it's the departure from that public trust idea that in many ways has led us to a number of our current challenges, including with respect to Kapukaki. And then we'll get into what's been happening with Kapukaki and Red Hill and the water crisis. And so hopefully folks are somewhat familiar with this, but water, why Aina, there's certain things that were considered so important, so precious in Native Hawaiian understanding that since time immemorial, they were considered to be unable to be owned, to be used for personal benefit, but in fact there's a responsibility on leaders and on everyone to ensure that they were protected and conserved, not just for the current generations, but for future generations. So really, there's this idea of a public trust where something so important it can't be privatized and it has to be used for the public good. That's rooted in Hawaiian tradition and custom and knowledge. And it's not surprising given the tremendous value that water provided, for these islands, not just drinking water, but providing for the watersheds, providing stream flow for not just native life, but also traditional agriculture, for local i'a or fish ponds, to support our pahuwai, our punawai, our springs, our wetlands. And I think it's important to note too that to the extent that water was benefited Kānaka, benefited humans, it was very carefully managed and systems were engineered so that, again, this resource could be protected and appropriately used so that it wouldn't compromise the resource, wouldn't compromise the interests of future generations. And water, in fact, was recognized as a kinolau, as a manifestation of major deities, including Kane. In other forms, it represented Lono, and there's lots of all kinds of mo'olelo about how Kane and Kanaloa that Kepoʻo mentioned would travel about and bring forth fresh water and therefore provide for people and for Aina. And so this public trust concept was embodied in the first constitution of the Hawaiian Kingdom. And again, it recognized that the land, water, everything, it belonged to the king and the chiefs and the people in common. And even though Kamehameha I was kind of the head of everyone, it was really his kuleana to manage these things. And through this idea and through these way of thinking and values and practices, Hawaii was able to sustain hundreds of thousands of people without any kind of like imports or anything like that. Unfortunately, as most folks know, in the 19th century, after the arrival of Westerners, lots of changes came to Hawaii. We have population loss to the disease, loss of social structures like the kapu system, and then the growth of Western influence like commercial enterprises, and then along with that, military presence and influence. And it was really a lot of the conflict between the Western idea of private property and the public trust in Aina and Vai kind of informs, again, some of these more drastic changes and ultimately, contributed to the overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom, which in turn led to even further erosion and destruction of the foundations of the public trust doctrine. So even with annexation, for example, the governor of Hawaii was still appointed by folks in DC, the president. So while Native Hawaiians were able to get the vote back, which had been deprived during after the overthrow and up to annexation, a lot of the policies they tried to pass were in fact vetoed and utterly stymied by the governor and then the oligarchy, the plantation oligarchy that controlled Hawaii for generations. And so we did have a kind of a renaissance recognition after a few generations of this oligarchical control, a recognition of the value and the importance of of Hawaiian culture, of Hawaiian values, identity of people, and so through this this movement in the 1970s and 1978, we amended our constitution to actually recognize this, and part of those amendments included, again, re-uplifting water and reaffirming water as a public trust resource, where it again has to be used for purposes that are beneficial to the public and for certain purposes, including the environment and including Native Hawaiian rights and practices and culture perpetuation. And bottom line is water has to be used for the public good, can't be wasted, has to be protected. Unfortunately, the current reality, given that we are still living with the legacies of this oligarchical control of our islands, that notwithstanding our constitution and our state water code and even Supreme Court case law, we really haven't fulfilled or restored the public trust as it deals with our water resources. So majority of areas are unregulated in terms of water use. Majority of our streams are still diverted, and if the water is even used, a lot of it is wasted. And now we see also too that the entire island of Oahu is under threat of disaster. And so to get into that, that's kind of what we're dealing with Red Hill. So I think it's really important to note too, not only was Puʻuloa such a valid and sacred space, but also Moanalua, the up Malka Valley, Malka areas. And there's specific mo'olelo that talk about the presence of water bringing forth the settlement of Kamawailuolani, who in turn helped transform this place into kind of like a paliuli, or like a Garden of Eden, from which people emerged and who were provided for by the abundance of the land, which in itself was supported by the presence of this water. In Kapukaki itself, Red Hill, where this fuel facility is located, it's known as a marker of Leilono, or its potential marker of Leilono, which is a leaping place, like a entryway into Po. And really this aquifer, these waters, especially the waters under Kapukaki, have always provided for life on this island, whether it was the abundant fisheries and local i'a and the Malka lo'ikalo and agriculture that was taking place, to more recent times where it has also been the source of water for about 400,000 people, from Halawa all the way to Maunalua, and that includes Waikiki, downtown Honolulu. And this source too, I think it's important to recognize that it's extremely pure because of a number of things, including the age of our islands, our location in the Pacific, the height of our mountains, and our native watersheds. They all contribute to this water purification process that over the course of 20, 30 years gives us some of the purest water in the world. So that brings us to the Red Hill facility, which was located in the 40s, just 100 feet above this source of life. It's comprised of 20 tanks. Each of them are about 25 stories tall. Their steel liners, when new, were extremely thin, so a quarter inch. If you imagine taking these 25-story tall tanks and shrinking them to a hydro flask, their steel liners would be the thickness of, like, the walls of the hydro flask would be like the thickness of tinfoil. And that was 80 years ago. As you can imagine, the massive scale of this facility made it inherently dangerous. It's been leaking fuel since the 40s, so for like 80 years. And again, it's just 100 feet above our drinking water aquifer, and it currently contains, as we speak, over 100 million gallons of fuel. And so what happened with the crisis is one of the more recent spills in May 2021 ended up releasing about 21,000 gallons of fuel. A portion of this fuel made its way into the Navy's drinking water system, essentially contaminating the tap water for 93,000 people. Thousands of folks got poisoned and had symptoms of acute exposure to petroleum. A lot of folks are still reporting not just illness, but also continued sheens and odors in their waters, on top of their physical symptoms and health symptoms to this day, even though, well, till Friday, when the water mains broke and now everyone's under a boil water advisory. But notwithstanding the declaration that the water was safe, for months people were still experiencing water contamination issues. And to be clear, it's not just those folks that have been affected, although they have borne the brunt of the direct impacts. Our major wells for Honolulu are now closed, which means we're pumping other wells a lot more than we probably should be. We're all being asked to conserve water. We might have to actually face water conservation mandates, depending on what happens over the next few years in terms of rainfall and water demands. Navy's still over pumping its one remaining well to serve its 93,000 customers. And they're also pumping about 4.5 million gallons of water per day from their Red Hill shaft, which is the one that was contaminated most severely, to try and capture that plume and keep it from migrating over to other wells, like as suggested in that image on this slide. And can this get worse? Absolutely. Again, there's over 100 million gallons of fuel that's just 100 feet above our aquifer. We know from our lawsuits that these tanks are actively corroding. There's water that's constantly infiltrating the facility, causing active corrosion in the very thin steel liner that I mentioned. There's a history of through-wall holes. They took samples. Every single sample was being corroded and rusted. And we also know through our lawsuits that these tanks, there's an inspection process for these giant tanks that isn't super accurate, misses the mark almost half the time, and the majority of tanks that fill in them right now haven't actually even been inspected using this, really questionable process in over 2 decades. Some of them haven't been inspected in 40 years or more. And we also know now too that the Navy hasn't been operating this facility consistently with EPA's own regulations with regard to underground storage tanks. And the really scary thing is the Navy is saying it's going to take 2 years to remove this fuel from our aquifer. And there is a Red Hill task force that's been stood up with about 100 folks in it. We don't have a clear idea of who actually is in this task force, what their jobs are. We're still not getting them to admit that this is an emergency, that a single earthquake could render Oahu almost potentially uninhabitable for generations. And so again, this is a major concern that's still ongoing. We're not powered Red Hill. And so just to outline some of the things that the community and Sierra Club has been doing, we filed multiple legal interventions over the past few years to try and get some state regulation of this facility, which is actually allowed under federal law. We had to sue the state to enforce its own laws against the Red Hill facility. We prevailed, so the Navy had to apply for a permit. We contested that permit to continue operating the Red Hill facility. That took a couple of years, and then the big spill happened, and the Department of Health was finally like, okay, you guys gotta defuel this facility. It's inherently dangerous. It's a ticking time bomb. And the Navy challenged that. So then we had to intervene and try to back the Department of Health up after suing them for all these years to make sure they didn't back down, make sure the Navy's feet continue to be held to the fire. We also have been, and the community has been working on the legislature and the city council to get laws passed that will now prohibit Red Hill and similar facilities, massive underground storage tank facilities, from being operated in the future. And really what's made the day in Browse this far has been the massive community mobilization that's really built on this foundation of community organizing. So Oahu Water Protectors, which Sierra Club and Hawaii Peace and Justice and many others helped to organize, was one of the first groups that was stood up last year before the spill happened. Hawaii Coalition, which is a coalition of Native Hawaiian organizations, has been really tremendous as well. There's a Shutdown Red Hill Coalition, which is a huge amount of organizations and groups. Shutdown Red Hill Mutual Aid, which is providing water and other support for affected families, as well as talking to them about the situation we're in and the bigger context of what it means to. Okay. And I'm just running out of time, so I just wanted to close with just a reflection that restoring the public trust is really in situations like Red Hill is really essential for our island's resilience going forward. And this is recognized in a lot of places, in a lot of other areas, other institutions that have looked to Hawaii as saying, hey, like in terms of food security, in terms of water security, in terms of community cohesion, all these things that are grounded in the public trust can also hold the key to unlocking resilience, not just for ourselves, but potentially for other places. And so with that, I will pass this on to Sandy Ward.
Aloha mai kako. Welcome to our audience. We are Hui o Ho'ohonua, serving the community through Mālama Puʻuloa, which is the restoration of Pearl Harbor to its ancestral abundance. My name is Sandy Ward. I'm the co-founder and executive director of Hui o Ho'ohonua, a nonprofit that works in the area to restore that abundance. I am not Hawaiian. I have Scottish-Irish ancestors. I was raised in Oregon, but I have lived on Oahu for half of my life, most of it as a high school science teacher, but I did retire from teaching in 2019 to focus fully on leading this nonprofit. I'm a lifelong learner and a professional optimist. And one of the reasons why I'm optimistic are the young people that we are able to hire. So I'd like to introduce Nick Rothstein.
Hi, my name is Nick Rothstein. I was born and raised in Eva. I grew up right down the street from where I work today, actually, Kapapapui Point Park. Currently pursuing a degree in biology at Hawaii Pacific University because I think my education is very important. I'm really a doer instead of a talker. I'm on the ground pretty much every day. I'm not at school.
And one of the things that Nick does is make every presentation better. And one of the things that he suggested was giving you a geographic reference for where we are and what we do. We did want to point out that there are multiple islands. This is an island chain, and we are on the island of Oahu. Many people just know it by Waikiki, but a lot of people do know the name Pearl Harbor. And again, we're grateful that all of you in the audience are here to look at Pearl Harbor from a different perspective. And for us, that means saying it by its name, Puʻuloa, and learning a little bit about where it sits. And Puʻuloa sits in the Ewa Moku or Ewa region, which is the largest central portion of Oahu. And it is all the lands that surround Puʻuloa where all the waters drain. And the Ewa Moku, as it is called, I want you to look at the map on the right. Those Hawaiian names are traditional land divisions called Ahupua'a. And so many of them are named with the prefix Vai or W-A-I, Waikele, Waipio, Waiava. And that also points out to the wealth of the abundance of water that is in this area. One of the reasons why we focus on restoration there, and one of the reasons why the devastating impacts to this area are so vital to address. So back to how we're doing that. Our nonprofit, Hui o Ho'ohonua, was founded in 2015 by those that live and work in the Ewa Moku. And it is our mission to address the perpetuation of historical trauma to the land, water, and people in the Ewa Moku on Oahu. And Mālama Puʻuloa, caring for Pearl Harbor and restoring that abundance, is our primary mission. And this picture actually illustrates what is typical of our hui, or a group of people united in purpose. These are community members from all over the region that come to do the hard work of restoration. I'd like to honor our hui a little bit more in depth. A group of people united in purpose. We actually are part of an evolving and growing network of people who want to Mālama Puʻuloa and restore that abundance. And rather than detail every part of this complex network, I just want to say that our Kānaka Maoli, or our Hawaiian, we have Hawaiian advisors, we have Hawaiian partners, we have Hawaiian employees, but they are central to what we do because of that ancestral knowledge. The way that they were able to manage lands for abundance is absolutely vital, that they are on top of our network for a reason. Even above policymakers, elected officials, and large businesses. even above conservation partners like the US Fish and Wildlife Service or the Division of Aquatic Resources. But I do want to point out that in orange and purple is the backbone of our organization. Those schools, those community members who actually come and do the work. So I detail our hui for a reason, because that group of people is what it's going to take to restore abundance. And what's so exciting for us is that when we put out the call, so many people are willing to come work, to advise us, and to support us. It takes a hui. The other thing it takes is a complex and holistic approach. What we think we're developing is a holistic and sustainable approach. And some people have honestly said, oh, you're trying to do too much. You can't clean the water and do education and try to work on food and try to work on science. And we respectfully say that if we want to restore abundance, we don't think that you can take one part out of this, out of our approach, because we are contributing to food and water security in using this approach. And we absolutely will not stop integrating Hawaiian history and place names and practices and science and technology in everything we do, especially our education work. We think it's very important to be able to empower community, because I'm 61, I'm not going to be around forever. And the community includes those born and raised, like Nick, on this island. We also think that it's important to contribute to relevant and impactful education programs. We're literally growing the next leaders who will do this work that may be multi-generational. Creating partnerships that did not previously exist, and piloting innovative collaboration. And we do impact policy and engage in policymakers, because some of the existing policies just aren't working. So it takes a lot of people, and it takes a varied, holistic approach to restore Puʻuloa to abundance. And I will just wrap up by describing our number one strategy is developing those partnerships. And we do it both as leaders and as learners, as members. So we, in this top diagram, we did develop the Evolving Puʻuloa Strategic Partnership and project-based partnerships to increase the capacity for all to do this restoration. So traditionally, the US Fish and Wildlife Service had not worked with the Hawaii Division of Forestry and Wildlife, had not worked with a nonprofit like the amazing Waiwaiola Hawaiian Waterkeepers, had not worked with Leeward Community College. So we are excited that we've developed that partnership. But more important, and the reason why I listed it first, is that we learned from partnerships such as the statewide Fish Pond Restoration Group that we just met with for the last 3 days, or as pictured below the map is the group of Hawaiian stewards that work throughout the Ewa region. It's all hands on deck, or as we say in Hawaii, it's a kako thing. It's going to take everybody to do this work. And I'd like to have Nick follow up on our other key strategies.
So our next key strategy is number 2, Hana, which is showing up and keep showing up and doing the work. Over the past 3 years, we've had over 7,000 volunteers engage in our Malama Puʻuloa program. With all of those volunteers, we've cleared about 7 acres of wetland, shoreline, and local ia, which is Hawaiian fish ponds. In total, we mostly clear out mangrove and trash in the area. Yeah, and if you look at these 2 pictures, the top one is the before and the bottom one is the after. It demonstrates the community change that can occur. So this is a dense forest of mangrove, and as you can see in the bottom picture, a large portion has been cleared out, and you can actually see the mountains on the other side. Yeah. Next. And our third key strategy to kind of tie everything together on why we're doing things, because when you're working, you want to know why you're working for something. We educate ourselves and other people. So some of the things we educate ourselves and other people on is the Hawaiian history, the protocol, the mo'olelo, which is the stories of the place and how they came to be, And we also try to implement the place names of these places. So instead of using Westlock Community Shoreline Park, we use Kapapapui Park. The people that we learn from are other people like ourselves that have been in the Malama Aina business much longer than us. You, in I guess mainland terms, would be biocultural restoration workers. We share what we learn to our we share what we learn with our volunteers, and those are typically school groups, community members, neighbors, and even the military. Yeah, so as I said earlier, education is very important to me, and I like to share that with other people. Knowledge is power, and we work to empower others. Next. And then so the Evamoku is a very vast place. It's not just us working in the area, and we'd like to point that out. Here's a small snippet of the Evamoku. The northern portion is a little bit cut off, but these are just some of the other organizations like ourselves working in the area, and we often engage with these other organizations that we have partnerships with too. Next. So why do we want to Malama Pu'uloa? Why do we want to take care of our home? Well, there's high cultural value, high sustainable food value. There used to be mullet fisheries that lined the whole interior of Pu'uloa. And if we could bring this back, we could reintegrate a sustainable approach to our food systems instead of getting all of our food from the mainland and stuff like that. There's also the largest concentration of freshwater, or one of the largest concentrations of freshwater in Hawaii, on Oahu, and Pu'uloa. Approximately 2/3 of the island's drinking water is concentrated in this area. The biocultural restoration of Pu'uloa is vital to climate change and the economic resilience for the entire island of Oahu. And so, why do we have such a sense of urgency to Malama Pu'uloa? Well, there's lots of pollution that threatens our water and food security. I don't know if you're aware of this, but we recently had the Red Hill incident, which was petroleum leaking into our aquifer. We have lots of invasive non-native species, and these all kind of culminate into the land being degraded. As you can see in this picture, this is just one of the many signs that where I work, right in my backyard, saying you can't eat the fish in the water because it's bad for your health. And we'd like to change that because there's people eating out of this water every single day, every day of the year, and we got to help them out. Got to help your community. Next. And then so to kind of tie everything together, our community-driven change, the indigenous wisdom, and our collaboration. You have our inputs, which is our partnership building, our on-the-ground work, our continual learning. Those are our three key strategies. And what did we produce? Well, we produced over $2 million in collaborative funding, 28 acres of restored Pu'uloa shoreline, and engage empowered community. Most of our volunteers are actually regulars that come out.
And I'd like to thank Nick, and I'd like to thank our audience. Mahalo to my fellow panel members and to the panel organizers. We would humbly like to invite the audience to continue learning about the topics that have been shared today. Our website, Malama Pu'uloa, provides quick and easy connections to several learning resources like the Halau o Pu'uloa Ewa Aina Inventory. It allows you to take a tour through each portion of this region to learn the mo'olelo, to see those maps, and it's been very helpful in our educational outreach. And Kepo'o was a part of creating that. To dive into those resources shared by my fellow panelists. And if you visit Hawaii, and we hope that you do, we invite you to visit or volunteer at our Aina site and those who are doing restoration work throughout the region. And this idea came from Nick, and I wholeheartedly agree that another thing to do when you visit is to spend the day at the Bishop Museum. It is a wonderful place to learn about the history, not only of Pu'uloa, but the entire Hawaiian Islands archipelago. And mahalo nui loa most of all to our audience. Please consider starting a conversation with others about what you learned today. And please consider supporting our work and our nonprofit via a donation or the Amazon Smile program. That just means that when you shop, a little bit of that money goes to us. And the direct link to our nonprofit donation website is in the chat, and you can learn how to support us through that tab. So mahalo nui loa to everyone. We appreciate you hearing a little bit more about why we have hope and why we believe in community-powered change.
Yeah, aloha kako. My name is Dani Espiritu, and I'll be closing us out. First of all, I want to just say to this organization just how honored I am to be here, and mahalo to the panelists who came before. Ovo no o Dani Espiritu no kane o he kolopoko mai vau. Wahana I vau I ka ua apua kea malela makamole o ke ahi aka hoi. Aloha, my name is Dani Espiritu. I was actually raised in Kaneohe and Ko'olaupoko by the waters of the Apuakea rain in that area. And these days I'm living actually in the moku of Ewa in Waimalu, where my ohana has lived for the last 4 generations. And the title of my presentation is Kahe Mauka Waimomona o Ewa. Yeah, continuously flowing are the sweet, fat, fertile waters of Ewa. And the term Waimomona I actually take from an interview that was recorded 50 years ago between Kupuna, Sarah Nakua, and Larry Kimura, where she's describing the vai in Waimalu and she's describing the vai in Waiao, and she talks about it being vai hui hui and vai momona. Yeah, this fat, fertile waters. So I thought it would be appropriate for us today to remember that in spite of all of the things that we've kind of discussed, that the water in Ewa continues to be momona, as Kyle and Kepoʻo had shared earlier, right? There's all kind of mo'olelo about the springs that are bursting throughout the Ahupua'a and areas of Ewa, yeah, from Waimalu, Waiao, Waiava, Waimano, Waipahu, Waikele. We see that word Wai, freshwater, repeated over and over, and it speaks to the abundance in our areas. Puʻuloa was known as being the breadbasket of our entire moku and much of the island. Some of the kupuna today even talk about how there were over 100 fish ponds just in Puʻuloa that fed the community, and the wai from upland, from the lo'ikalo, from the taro fields would flow into Puʻuloa and create such an abundant space. And I just wanted to share a little bit of personal connection to the area. So the picture on the bottom is actually a painting from the 1800s of Puʻuloa. It shows sandy bottoms and an area that's abundant. And the pictures at the top are actually pictures of my ohana from the 1960s. Fishing from, eating from, interacting with this aina before it was cemented, before our streams were channelized. The picture on the right, as you can see, color starting. Yeah, that the stream became channelized, but we were still eating and fishing from our streams. At the mouth of this stream, there was a fish pond called Pa'akea that was noted to be a 12-acre fish pond. That's the one that it's connected to what Kepoʻo was talking about with that mo'olelo of Meihea. And then the folks in the middle are swimming in the stream before it was channelized. But my ohana grew up eating from Puʻuloa, eating from our streams, and interacting. And I think it speaks to the pilina, the generational connection between Kanaka and Aina, between people and land, and not just land, but land and waters that will feed us. And then we can begin to realize that in my generation, my relationship with these places was very different. By then, the contamination had reached the point where we were told not to swim in those streams, not to touch the waters of Puʻuloa, and definitely not to eat of them. And so we see in just 3 generations, that relationship has changed drastically. I know a lot of folks are including these same signs. The sign to the left that says like contamination, do not consume. This is at the actual spot where my kupuna would gather fish. My grandmother tells us that they would walk down to the shores of Puʻuloa. They could stick their hands in the lepo, and they would just pull up clams and then take them home and eat it. And so that petroleum pipeline sign to the right is directly westward of where Kapa'akea fish pond would have been. And then the sign to the left is where my kupuna would have gathered food maybe 60 years ago. And again, this kind of speaks to the militarization that Kyle was talking about in terms of the dredging of Puʻuloa and the influx of military vessels that has led to Puʻuloa becoming having multiple superfund sites and sources of contamination as well. It shifting from being a place where we would gather and eat to one viewed as being occupied by the military, right? Oahu is about a quarter of Oahu is currently occupied by the U.S. military. This shows a shot of several different ahupua'a in Ewa. At this time, a lot of the lo'ikalo have since been converted into other sorts of agricultural lands, but I think it shows still how much was being used for food production versus this next slide, which is the exact same area that is now primarily residential. Some is occupied by military, some is occupied by the quote unquote state of Hawaii for different purposes. Yeah, and that little blue mark, that flag in the left side is a space called Ka'onohi, which I'll talk a little bit about. I work with an organization called Ho'ola Houia Kalawau. Yeah, and our focus is to restore identity and abundance to the ahupua'a, the land division of Kalawau in Ewa Oahu. And we'll do that by caring for aina, by growing, preparing, and eating our ancestral foods, and by building community through education and the return to Native Hawaiian values and practices. And so we cultivate primarily lo'ikalo, irrigated taro fields that are all spring-fed, that would have flowed into what would have been called opu, loko opu, fish pond that Kalani Manuia, who Kepo'o spoke about, was credited with developing. That fish pond is no more. And so when we talk about, Daviana McGregor uses the term cultural kipuka to speak about these communities that have survived the onslaught and sort of flow of urban development. And I think Ka'onohi is one example of that. Yeah, and then No'ea Peralta builds on this, and he talks about kipuka aloha aina as these places that intentionally build this concept of aloha aina through our practice generationally. And Ka'onohi, I think, is an example of that as well, because for those of us who are working hard to restore our food systems, we know that we cannot do that without also engaging politically and also making stances. Right before I got on this call, I had to submit a water commission testimony because of things that are happening with Red Hill and how that could directly impact the flow of jet fuel through our springs if nothing changes. And so in this picture, we see community engaged, and really we're doing that through the development of pilina. As Kanaka, we know that people need aina and aina need people in order to thrive, and that ways that occupation has severed those connections have led to all kinds of health complications and issues for our communities. And so really we just need Kanaka back on aina, working to restore both. Some of these pictures include organizations in the Ewa Moku. The one on the top left actually includes some of Auntie Sandy's crew with Maolama Puʻuloa, who came out to help with a workday, as well as some youth with a program called Ulua'e Learning Center, who is intentionally cultivating that same relationship with youth in our area to different places in the Ewa Moku, and teaching them about how to plant, how to harvest, how to build those generational connections with our wahi. And so, this is with Miki'ala Litstone, who are doing amazing work in the community. And so I think ultimately, when it comes down to it, our kahe or our call to the community and to folks who may be watching is to engage. If you are from these areas, the aina is crying out, and the aina needs you to ho'i ka piko. Yeah, to return to the piko, return to the source, and to put your hands in the lepo, whether that be building fish ponds, or restoring lo'ikalo, or cutting down mangrove, or cutting down California grass, whatever it may be, the aina needs you. And I think we will see as we return to aina that we need aina as well. And for folks who have resources and are able to support this hana, there are any number of organizations, in our area that are doing amazing work. And we always need support. We always need resources. We always need folks who are willing to stand with us, to advocate for things that like Kyle and Wayne were bringing up in terms of Red Hill. Yeah, if things like overdevelopment or the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility is not drained, that directly impacts our ability to do what we do. If there is a catastrophic spill, all of these places have springs in them, and that fuel has the potential to move into our areas and directly impact our ability to practice culture. And so we have no choice but to engage politically. And so, for folks who are listening, if you would like to join in the actual physical hana that we're doing, the actual physical work that we're doing, if you would like to support financially or in other ways, or if you would like to support through advocacy, please connect with us. We would be more than happy to kind of walk folks through what that might look like. So mahalo nui kākou, aloha.
Oh, muted, Abreen.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. You're the best. We're just welcoming everybody back to kind of go over questions and answers and seeing how anybody needs any clarification on the details of our presentations to really get to understand Hawaii and Ke Awalau o Puʻuloa. Yeah. Oh, there we go. I got all of those. Thank you so much for letting me know I was muted. My personal take on it, as somebody that's going to be a lifetime learner, you guys all have lifetimes of experiences through studious adventures or through physical experience. My own personal experience has just been through being the student that Dani would be showing how the lo'i works, from its cultivation to its lifelong longevity, and how from the smallest things that you're getting from your kalo can perpetuate more of your life, from the stem into the child to the dirt into the water. Let me see. I think it's pretty good on everything. I liked how the story was going, but does anybody have anything more that they'd like to share right now? No. I think everybody's muted though. Yeah.
I will add one thing. What a lot of people have noticed in our presentation is that where is the military in that hui? And I will say that we have had hundreds of military volunteers. They get it. And we do have military dependents in our schools. And when they're learning in the context of a lo'i or a loko'ia, they get it at that age. They get it real quickly. And we are hoping that this unified voice calls the DoD to. We honestly don't think that they have the capacity to fix it because they don't have the ancestral mana'o, the ancestral knowledge. But we want them to get busy and be a part of what everyone else is doing. So I just want to point out, everyone always asks me, well, you're building this big network. What's the DoD doing there? And I will say, honestly, not enough yet. So we're really grateful for Wayne and Dani and Kyle and groups that are saying, okay, let's do more.
Any thoughts on the intersection of tourism and Red Hill?
I can start.
Mhm.
Can you hear me? I think one thing that is important to emphasize that we're in a water crisis, and so the aquifer is already contaminated. We're looking at mitigating the spread of fuel, and as Wayne had shared, as a result, some of our primary wells and shafts that we use for public drinking water have been shut down. Our Board of Water Supply is working to drill emergency exploratory wells over the next few years. And some of those wells and shafts supported the urban Honolulu area and the majority of the South Shore of our island. And so as he was sharing before, we're constantly monitoring chloride levels and things like that. So when we talk about tourism, and I want to say the statistic is like in July alone, we had over 900,000 tourists just to Oahu. And so when we're thinking about supporting our population, in addition to folks that are coming in, and this is maybe a personal opinion, but I personally don't know that there's an ethical way to be a tourist right now during a water crisis. Just considering that we are in a water shortage, and it's not just due to climate change, it's due to the poisoning of the aquifer by the Navy's bulk fuel storage facility. And so I know that there's a lot of ohana, perhaps on this call and perhaps on the continent and in other places that would like to support. And I think there are a lot of other ways that you can kako'o and that you can support and you can stand with Hawaii during this time.
If I could add a little bit on that to what Dani said, I think, I have just an allergy to the word tourism. And I think it it really privileges the taking and the extraction and the consumption of a place and experiences over responsibilities of having a relationship with a place, pilina with a place. And so I think we need new terminology about how we relate to people in other places when we visit, because you're going to somebody's home, and usually that means you get invited, you have permission, right? You follow certain rules of conduct, and tourism is sort of like a free for all for people to just come and take an experience and dig out, and that's really problematic. And social media has kind of supercharged that, which is makes it even more dangerous for people because they get into trouble, go hiking in places they're not supposed to be, or get in the ocean in places where they're not supposed to go. But it's also destructive to communities and cultural practice and so forth. So that's my general take on tourism itself. But in terms of like thinking about Red Hill and the intersection, I think one thing is just the consumption of fossil fuel. Red Hill is a fossil fuel disaster that has destroyed, and threatens our water. The overthrow of Hawaii and the occupation of Hawaii was primarily a fossil fuel coup d'etat because the U.S. wanted a coaling station. They wanted a gas station in the Pacific in order for them to dominate the Pacific Ocean. And that's why they took Pearl Harbor. That's why they took over Hawaii. So maybe we need to rethink the whole framework of fossil fuel driven imperialism and think about, a different way of being in the world with each other, especially now that the planet is in crisis, climate crisis.
Mahalo.
Yeah.
I do like that you guys are sharing with that. That is a very big impact towards everybody as a whole, especially on the islands. Yes.
I will just say, because of that ray of hope, I have to live there, and I am impacted by the jet fuel in my water right now, and so I do have to have the hope. And this morning I met with an amazing young Hawaiian woman who through Kupu is working at the National Park Service at the USS Arizona Memorial. And we both commented that when you go on their website, you click on culture, it starts at 1940. Come on. So this is a place where almost 2 million people visit every year. And I'm excited that right now, this amazing young Hawaiian leader is changing the dial on that and getting our National Park Service to tell stories of Aina Momona through people that live in the community. So Dani, I'm going to connect you to Kailina Durant. So part of this whole presentation is to move the needle, and it's moving.
It is a very slow but sure way to go about it. Wayne?
I'll just add kind of to build off of what Kyle was saying. We got into this Red Hill crisis because of these assumptions and this deference that we provided to the what military people were saying, and a lot of that was built off of, again, our assumption of economic dependency on the federal taxpayers, taxpayer dollars get poured into our economy. And I think a lot of the conversation on tourism and over tourism and trying to manage all of that also is based on these assumptions and these real and very narrow perspectives about what's benefiting Hawaii, and that blinds us to the bigger picture, externalities, use of water, use of fossil fuels, the contribution to our waste stream, like all of these things that aren't really considered in tourism. And so to some extent, maybe Red Hill can wake us up and again, get us to think about the need to pivot really hard back towards a more resilient structure, towards a more just society where Native Hawaiian governance is restored, especially since that's a community that's been impacted by both these things probably most deeply. And my hope, to be honest with Sandy, is that what's going on with Red Hill, as tragic and incredibly frustrating and scary as it is that the attention that's being given and potentially even from the tourists to come visit here, but also like a national and international stage, can shine a light on the larger assumptions of Western colonialism and military occupation that's been wreaking havoc all across Oceania. And we've been talking to so many communities that are going through this, are looking at their own water sources being contaminated, from Guahan to Okinawa, the Philippines, Alaska, even Vieques in Puerto Rico, and of course across the continent. And so that's my hope, is that we not only save our island and save our future generations here, but also potentially help shift that discourse so that we can make these pivots on a much more larger scale.
Does anybody have any idea on how we can move forward the discussion you're already doing it on a local level, but how do we impact people on a grander level? I mean, everyone's going through political channels to do their part and sending in their paper. And it's really funny how a piece of paper is completely tied into how our livelihood and how we can drink water and how we can breathe air, and how that validates the future of our lives. Is I wrote in this piece of paper, and hopefully there's enough pieces of paper to get the ball rolling at a state legislature or federal level. So how can we as a whole impact more people to get what it needs to be done? I mean, you guys are already doing the work. So how do we, as someone that's not as involved, maybe abroad, how can we help to combine our efforts from this point in?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. And I think probably one of the quickest answers to that is, first of all, we actually do need to do more to strengthen what we're doing here at home. So there's still a lot of people who live here who aren't really up to speed on a lot of these issues, right? There's a water crisis going on right now, but fuel isn't coming through everybody's faucets yet but we don't want to wait until it gets to that point. And so a lot of what's involved is strengthening that base here and really approaching it from a standpoint of koleana and what that means, right? Like, it's not just responsibility, but it's like, who has the right to carry out that responsibility as well? So we need to engage the people who live here, who are from here, and try and tie more into getting to know this place and love this place better. So it's taking these stories and spreading them more, and then within our own networks, we can then start taking that out and branching out to a larger audience if necessary, as needed and whatnot too. But I think a big part of it is, again, facilitating these reintroductions to our own aina here. To so many don't know the stories of Puʻuloa because a lot of it's been overshadowed. Another thing I would add to that, to go on a little bit of a tangent away from the question too, is to just kind of re-emphasize some of the really important lessons that at least I've been taking away from this place. Is that, like, as you see from the mo'olelo I shared and from the stories that everyone else has shared through life experiences, involvement with community, engaging in policy and engaging the freaking military themselves, that this is a place that is really valuable, that is really vai, that in ancestral times was a place of great bounty. And so on one lesson I would like to emphasize is that, like, we talk about this in the ancestral terms and whatnot too, but we want to emphasize that, you know, what was before is not lost, right? That can still happen again. And there are people on the ground, people here in this conversation that are helping to contribute to that. So there is hope. But what needs to happen on top of that too is that there's a big aspect missing from the whole picture too, as Sandy kind of mentioned. Like, what is the military doing right now? Aside from poisoning the water, they aren't really doing much else to help us, right? And so what's missing is some of the other lessons from these mo'olelo, like we talked about with Kane Kua'ana, right? And the I'aha Maoleo is accountability. So there was punishment levied against the Maka'ainana for extracting too much, like a little, like maybe one more basket more of oysters than she should have taken. And so she was taxed for that. And Manakuina Metcalf writes about the penalties for actually outright destroying systems of water in the terms of like an irrigation system for fresh water. If someone were to destroy that, the punishment was that they would be put to death and their body would be used to patch the hole that they created. This was a level of accountability at that time. This is how serious we considered resources like right now. And then now there is a gross lack of accountability, not only for the extraction of water through uses like the tourism industry, but also now the outright degradation of it, the desecration of it, and pollution of it by the US military. And yet, how are they even being held accountable for the poisoning of their own people who live in these facilities? Nothing is being done right now, and yet they're still pumping water and then pumping fuel into that water. So, sorry, I'll get off the soapbox here soon. But yeah, basically, as far as reaching a larger audience, well, right now we need to continue the awesome work, like, you know, Dani and Sandy and so many of the people, the ohana within Puʻuloa are doing to reconstruct, to rebuild, right, to contribute to that legacy of Kalani Manuia and of building and growing and thriving. And then as we do so, talk to your friends, yeah, talk to your neighbors. Keep checking out all these different social media sites too. Wayne mentioned a bunch of different sites like Oahu Water Protectors, Shutdown Red Hill Coalition, Hawaii Peace and Justice. Check out Malama Puʻuloa and everything that they're posting. Keep up to date on the issues. And they've put together so much great resources there. And so that's one way, if you want to share that with your friends from outside of here, then that's a great way to kind of kokua with that. So yeah, I'll jump off the soapbox for now and turn it over to
No,
anyone
you
else.
can stay on it. You can stay on it. Go.
Stay.
Well, thank you, Kepo'o. That does make a really, really straightforward point of no accountability. So in our culture, it is known that you have a responsibility to whatever you do and whatever you put out to your family and your home. Now, that is a mentality that we have. That is a way of life. It is the way you should live because it cares for others the same ways that you would want to be cared for. So we say the words malama. Malama means to care, but caring is not solely just in your mind. It is fully in your body. It is fully in your actions and what you do from this point on. So as you're watching from home or abroad or whatever you may do, I would like to encourage you to check out any one of these people's wonderful links in their descriptions because they do show and embody what malama is. Malama aina, which is to care for our own, which is everything that we're supposed to do. So I'd like to encourage everybody to talk to Uncle Kyle real quick. Woo!
So if I could just add on to get up on Kepo'o's soapbox there. Thanks for setting it up. No, I think that other question was a really good one about what can people do, especially if you're not here in Hawaii. I think one misconception that makes it hard for places like Hawaii to make changes that involve like the United States government changing the way it treats us is this idea that islands are separated and are remote and disconnected. And I think this is one way by sort of diminishing the perceived importance of islands or their significance. You can do bad things to them because it doesn't matter, right? This is what Henry Kissinger says about the Marshall Islands. There's only 90,000 people out there. Who gives a damn, right? So this is the kind of the mentality that we have to shift. And if we think about islands from an oceanic perspective, they're not isolated. They're all connected, right? So no island is an island. And when you look at the success of social movements like the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana, the Nuclear Free and Independent Pacific, or even the Wayne was mentioning the movement to stop the bombing of Vieques Island in Puerto Rico. What was key was the mobilization of the Puerto Rican and Latino diaspora in that case, where in the major cities, they were able to apply political pressure that then got the United States to stop the bombing of Vieques and to withdraw. And so I think similar kind of pressure was necessary for Kaho'olawe, and we will need similar kinds of support to restore Puʻuloa and other places that are also being used by the military, abused by the military. Makua Valley, Pohakuloa, these are all places actively being used as training areas that we would like those lands to come back to the care of Hawaiians in those communities. And so get involved, organize networks, solidarity groups, stay in touch with our local groups here in Hawaii so that we can build this movement so that we're not just working on an island, we'll be part of a network, a web of connections and intimacies. Thank you.
You guys are getting fired up. I like it. I will just say, as a school teacher across our nation, there's a fight against the truth in our history, and that the history from multiple perspectives. So maybe stop fighting that in our schools, because kids need to know the truth. They need to know that there was a Hawaiian overthrow. And the kids are very concerned about climate change. So honoring that indigenous resource management knowledge wherever you live. I know that that's an exciting part of the conversation on climate change resiliency. Everybody wants food and fresh water for the future. And those who have been managing it for generations have a lot of our answers. So just wherever you live, there's those who are there for hundreds or thousands of years, and their perspective is really important to include in our education program. So if your local school district is trying to stop the perpetuation of teaching that, that's another thing you can do on a local level.
Thank you, Sandy. I think this covers a whole lot of different ranges of subjects of how we can move forward, especially as those who aren't as involved or who would like to be somewhat involved. We can always take a step forward at our local level and just talk story, learn, ask, and that's all you can really do. We do have the internet as a broader language, but it doesn't show you what is happening on your local level. So as a Hawaiian, we know to speak and to conversate with the people that are around us so that we can get the spirit of what we really need to learn. If anybody has some final thoughts, we're going to be wrapping up here soon. Would anybody like to share some closing notes? Oh, no. So I'd like to kind of claim a ahui ho for everybody. That means until we meet again. Mahalo e everybody. I will see you soon.